if memory serves me correct, I think it was Yogi Berra that once said, "It ain't over until it's over."
This is Truth to Ponder with Bob Bierman.
I know for many of you listening to the program today, it is a stressful time. A lot has been going on here with the voting in the United States, and in a handful of states, it's a mess. I can honestly say, and I don't want to relish in this too much, but I can remember 20 years ago, we had moved to Florida a couple of years before, and the election of 2000. I'm not going to get into discussing the politics, but the mess that was left by 3 counties in Florida, those counties being Miami-Dade, Broward being probably the worst, followed by Palm Beach County, held up the results of the election over everything from dimpled chads to hanging chads to pregnant chads. Remember all that? People with their glasses, and they had on these, they had magnifying glasses in their hands, a jeweler's loop over their eye, whatever, trying to get inside the mind of whoever was voting. And did they really mean to vote for somebody or not? Or was that a mistake? And they're trying to second guess a ballot. And it became just an exorbitant mess. I mean, it was a disaster. And it's taken a long time for Florida to get their collective act together, which is a good thing. And it was amazing that this year we, in the state of Florida, didn't do all that bad and had the results in early. And now the states that made fun of Florida back in the day, like, Pennsylvania, comes to mind, Michigan, and a few others, even North Carolina, suddenly they're in the target zone of a massive mess on their hand. I'm not going to get too much into the merits. I'm not going to get too much into the politics. I'm not going to get too much into the results, because right now, everything's kind of in a holding pattern, and it's going to take a while to sort this out. If anybody out there listening thought the idea of mailing a ballot to everybody that's ever voted was a good idea, you just were proven wrong. I watched someone a little while ago on television, a dear, sweet lady, and she had voted all her life. She's older than I am, probably in her 70s, pushing 80, and she went to a polling place in, I believe, Nevada. And when she got there to vote, as she has done all her life, going to the polling place on Election Day, she was told she and her roommate had already voted. And they said, no, we did not. Well, their ballots got stolen, and somebody else voted in their place. People in Nevada that have been dead for years voted this year. People that moved out of the state or just moved into the state that were not legal residences voted this year. And this is being repeated all over the country. Now, answer me a question. Why would anybody want such a messed up system that is so easy for fraud to exist? It's because they want the fraud. They need the fraud. They need the ability of stealing your vote. Now, I know I'm going to have some people that disagree, and I might even see them on a certain email exchange group that will go unmentioned, criticizing me, which is fine. I don't care. But if you think what they did in Nevada is a good idea, your mind is screwed up royally. You are, you're stupid. I mean, ignorance can be repaired, but stupid is forever. Anybody that thinks this was a good idea, only 2 people think it's a good idea: stupid people and those that are trying to rig an election. There is no in between. And what we're seeing in Nevada is proof of the Harry Reid machine in its full glory. People reaching beyond the grave to vote. People having ballots mailed to their home, though they did not request them. And see, that's the problem with mailing a ballot to everybody. Too many, even if it's 1%, when an election is close, even 1% is way too many. I have no particular problem with voting by mail per se. My wife and I are residents of Florida, though we spend some time in the mountains of northeast Georgia. This year, because of things being done at the home, we're here a little longer in Georgia. And we voted absentee as a result. We had no choice. The last time I voted, I was in Florida, and I went to the polling place on Election Day. And in 2016, I went to the polling place a couple of days before during the early voting period on a Saturday, and my vote was counted. A system with mail-in voting should require the ability for you to track the ballot. And in our case, the one we did, we could. We knew when it was mailed in, and we checked, and it was scanned in and counted. We knew our vote was already done. And nobody had tampered with it. It wasn't in somebody else's mailbox. It wasn't like one person had 18 ballots arrive at their place. 18. And none of them were that person except for one. So 17 ballots arrived at a house. Now, that person could have sent all 17 back in. There is a problem with the kind of voting that's going on. And I'm very, very concerned that there are people that want to use these kind of shenanigans to upset and cause anarchy in the country. Any state using the coronavirus as an excuse, we got to keep everybody safe because we're all going to die of the coronavirus, don't you know? Don't you know that if you go outside to a polling place, you're going to die? Yet going to a liquor store was fine. Going to Walmart was fine. Going to Home Depot was fine. But going to church and a polling place, you can't do that. You're going to die of the coronavirus. I didn't have to do anything this year to get my absentee ballot. I didn't have to make a big deal of getting it. We've been doing it that way for a few years. And even then, there are ways of getting your ballot taken care of without having to go to a polling place among a lot of people. Once again, this pandemic gets used for purposes that are nefarious. Now, before my critics get on there and say, oh, you don't believe the virus is serious? Yes, of course I do. We've talked about it. I know people that have been sick with this virus. In my circle of friends and family, no one has died. Nobody has been hospitalized. I know of some that have and have recovered. I'm aware of somebody whose work I follow who recently passed away. But that person also was elderly and had many other health issues long before the virus came along. And life expectancy there was probably lower than they would want to admit. For my wife and I, we take precautions in everything we do. We don't put ourselves in a high-risk category because we are, well, we're over 65. We just turned 66. So I'm not going to do certain things, even in the flu season, to minimize my exposure. We're always a little bit cautious. The coronavirus, it's going to be fascinating over the next 2 months to see what actually happens. I'm not making any predictions, but I'm going to be curious to see what happens around the world with this virus and in North America between now and, let's say, February. That gives us about 3 months, 90 days. I'm curious where we will be next year. As far as who's going to be the president of the United States, I don't know. And I don't have a crystal ball. But I do know a few things. There's some things that are hard to explain occurring only where Democrats are counting the ballots. My wife reminded me of something that Dr. Phil said. I'm not one of his greatest fans, but he's right. If you have nothing to hide, you don't hide anything. And we've seen where they're trying to keep poll watchers so far away they can't observe what's really happening. They're putting up paper on windows so people can't look in to where the counting is occurring. And now cell phone video is being leaked of people actually disposing of a ballot and other things that should not be happening. If you're being truly honest in the way you count the ballots, you don't care who looks. If you don't like being observed, then find another job. It is a sacred responsibility in our republic, our democratic republic, to make sure that all the votes are counted properly, honestly, and fairly. And if you are going to give the appearance of evil, I'm going to assume that you are. If you're making a big effort to keep poll watchers away or letting people see what is happening to these sacred ballots, then you honestly do have something to hide. Well, that's my rant and rave on this, and we'll see what plays out in states like Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina, and Pennsylvania. Some are telling us it'll be next week. Okay, fine. I'd like to know why. I'd like to know why in the past you can run these numbers out so quickly. What is the screw up this year? Is it the mail-in balloting that went to too many people and probably some dead people and they voted? There's going to be some issues because there has been no way. You know, my wife said something the other day. I want you to think about this just for a moment and ask yourself in certain states or counties why. I can remember back in 2004, my late wife passed away from cancer. She was a little older than I was, so she had just started collecting at the young age of 62, her Social Security. My wife was 11 years older than I was, so you can do the math. And she died, and it did not take but a week before the Social Security Administration knew that my wife had passed away. They didn't send the next month's check, but they sent the $200 and whatever burial benefit. Notice how quickly, even in 2004, or 2008. My wife now, she lost her husband back in 2014. And guess what? I want you to guess what? It didn't take but days before they were clawing back for the money they had just put in to that account because he had passed away. Why is it that when we pass away, the voter rolls can not be updated as easily as Social Security? Ask yourself that question. Why is it? Why is it that Social Security, Medicare, all of that, they know when you pass away, but the voter rolls don't? And a year passes by, 2 years, 5 years in some cases, 10 years. Why can't we in this age of technology do something so simple as to be able to connect a death certificate to a voter registration, which should already be only in that state? Why is it when somebody moves nowadays, it's so easy to track that they have moved? And why can't the voter rolls reflect that? If I go to another state and move and I register to vote, at one time I was registered to vote in a different state because I lived there for years. And when I moved and I changed my driver's license and I changed my voter registration to Florida, why can't the former state then be notified That should be part of the process to say, what state did you live in? What county? Oh, I lived in this county. And automatically, because they have the correct information, the information in the prior state removes me from their role. I don't understand why this is so complicated. I think it's by design by those that are crooked and deceitful in their heart to make sure it's always screwed up. If you say we can't do that, then explain to me why we can't do that. It seems to work everywhere else in our life. Why can't it? ID for voting. Another biggie. If you want to buy a pack of cigarettes, you have to have an ID. You want to buy some alcohol, even if you look like you're 60 or 70, you got to give a birth date and show an ID in many states. If you want to go to a check cashing place, you need an ID. Why is it we assume any warm body that walks into a voter place should be just given a ballot because they showed up? The only reason you do that, and don't give me this garbage, suppressing the vote. Only somebody with brain syphilis would come up with something like that. I'm coming out. I'm telling you what I think. I'm tired of this brain syphilis that is overwhelming this land and screwing up people's minds. Every vote counts. Every legitimate, every legally cast vote should be counted. If you are committing fraud, if you are stealing a vote, if you're ineligible to vote, you should not be permitted. The Constitution of this country, as amended, gives the right of citizens to vote. And with limited exception, every citizen over the age of 18 or who is 18 on election day can register to vote. If you're a male, you have to register for the Selective Service. I did. Everybody who's my age, they had to register for the draft. Even today, you registered for Selective Service. Period. Why is it so much of a problem for people to register one time if they stay in a community for their entire life to vote? If you move, you have all these other things like utilities to take care of. I mean, why can't this be done? It's because there are people that don't want it done. They want to keep the option open for fraud, just in case it's going to be a very close election. And don't bother sending me information about, well, voter fraud doesn't exist. Yeah, it does. The mainstream media chooses to bury their head in the sand or somewhere else to ignore that problem because they have a narrative. For NBC, ABC, CBS, the corrupt, bankrupt, morally, intellectually, journalistically media, they're nothing but a propaganda arm that Joseph Goebbels would be proud of. I don't think you could get German radio to be as obliging as MSNBC. Enough about politics. We're going to take a break a little bit early on this segment. But I do, before I close this segment, I want to address something, and then I'm going to talk about some more positive stuff after the break. I don't care if you criticize me. I can handle it. I'm a big boy. But I choose not to engage in what I call fruitless arguments, especially on my personal Facebook page. And somebody called me out on that. Oh, he doesn't want to argue. Well, it's not that I don't want to argue. My personal Facebook page is not the Facebook page for the radio show or podcast. My Facebook page is primarily for my family and my friends to interact with me And I mentioned yesterday purging some people off Facebook because it's not what I want Facebook to be used for if it's my personal page. And I got, he just doesn't want to debate. And then I get misquoted that I'm saying that I don't want to debate this and that and the other. And I explain why. This is my personal Facebook page. And just to remind you, this is what I said yesterday on the program. For people to vote as they do, and I know some people, either they are very deceived, they don't understand, they don't pay attention, they don't like Donald Trump, and so they'll just vote for the other guy, not knowing what comes with, what strings are attached with the other guy. They don't get it. We have a lot of voters out there that are just so naive. And I've noticed, maybe you have too, we have people that we used to know on Facebook, and I just had to let them go. They decided they hate Trump so bad, they pass along fake stuff that's not even true. And when you point it out, they say, so what? I just don't want him in office, so I'll leave it up there anyway. They don't care if it's a lie. How many consciences have been that seared over politics? And I've got a policy now. I don't argue anymore with anybody about politics. I'm done. I don't have time to argue with people on Facebook about politics. If you want to comment and be acidic about it, I don't need you, I don't need you disturbing me on Facebook. And you may say, well, Bob, how are you going to help someone, grow or learn? And I'm always reminded of something in Scripture. And sometimes this is one of the hardest things that we do. Do you remember when Jesus sent out his disciples 2 by 2? And there's a debate, is it 35 pairs or 36 pairs? Well, let's say 7. It was like 70 or 72 of them went out, 2 by 2. And Jesus said, wherever you go to give this message, if you feel the Spirit descend upon you and this is the place to be, you stay. And you stay as long as you need to. If the Spirit is telling you to move on and don't waste your time, he says, kick the dust off your shoes and go. My point on all of this is very simple. There's a time for everything. A time to debate, a time to discuss, a time to, as the Bible says, reason together. But in my experience, having done talk radio in the past, there are just some people out there that you can never reason with, you can never have an honest debate with. It's a never-ending process of this one-upmanship game. They don't want to hear anything that's truthful. They will reject anything you say out of hand. And frankly, on my personal Facebook page, that's not what I have it for. While I share things with my family and my friends that I hold true and dear, it's not where I'm out there where everybody can just jump in and start arguing with me. That's not what I want it for. I have enough of that in my life in the other stuff that I do. And there comes a point in your day-to-day life, enough is enough. You cannot be engaged morning, noon, and night in arguments with people that become a total waste of your time. You're never going to change their mind. And chances are, unless you have something extremely compelling, you're probably not going to change mine. Give you an example of what I'm talking about. I'll make a statement about if so-and-so gets elected, it's going to cost you more. And then I come back, well, only for people making over $400,000 a year. That's all they don't you understand? Well, number one, I don't believe that, but put that aside. It doesn't necessarily have to be in your income tax for the government to find more ways to extract money out of your wallet. For the first time in my lifetime, literally, for the first time in my lifetime, and we're talking, I was born in the early 50s, we are energy independent. And while I wish gasoline was a little cheaper, I also realize as I travel state to state how much of that is taxes. But I can remember about 5 years ago going to a gas station to fill up my car. At the time, it was just a small Jeep, nothing extravagant, nothing monstrous, but it cost me like $70 to fill it up. Now that same vehicle is $36 to fill it up. Well, that's only $30, yeah, but $30 a week is $1,560 a year on average. What I'm saying is, certain things that we do will raise other costs. In other words, it doesn't have to be a direct tax on you. And even if it ends up being true, and as I say, I will believe the idea that nobody under $400,000 will see an increase in their, quote, tax. I believe that like I believed you can keep your doctor and keep your plan and you'll save $2,500 a year. Somebody sent me this link, all garbage as far as I'm concerned. I'm going to only talk for myself. For a number of reasons, worked as an independent contractor on a part-time basis when I turned 62. And I was not making a tremendous amount of money at that time. Matter of fact, I was definitely lower middle class. But my insurance cost for my wife and I was over $1,200 a month, and it had been about $400. And it went up quickly over a couple of year period. Notice that when they passed Obamacare back in 2009, with that one vote in the middle of the night, all the damage and real price increases only kicked in after 2012. Nobody noticed. After all, it's going to save us money. After all, we can keep our plan. I could not keep my plan. My plan, because of the law, was discontinued. And it's a good thing, being a male, to know that I can identify as a woman and get a pap smear. Now think about that. That's the stupidity of Obamacare. As a male, I can now identify as a female and demand a pap smear, and they got to pay for it. If you think I'm kidding, I'm not. Do a little research. I'm paying for coverage that I'll never need. Truly, I doubt if I'm going to need the service of a baby doctor, so to speak. I don't think at my age I'm going to be giving birth. But see, it was a one-size-fits-all. And you can argue with me all you want. And if you want to argue, there's always email, and there's always the web page. There's always the Facebook page for Truth to Ponder. It's out there as well. I'll engage you there, but never on my personal Facebook page. I reserve that for my family, my friends, my kids, my grandkids. It's not where I want to. I don't want to spoil the experience by engaging in arguments you can never win, because some people, they just want to keep arguing back. And that's why I draw a line. Look, I'll give you my opinion, I'll listen to yours, and I'll respond, but endless debates, waste of my time, a waste of yours. Life is too short. Life is too short to engage for all your waking hours in your political thought. There are a lot of other things a lot more important out there than politics. Well, that's more than I wanted to say, but it had to be said. This is the program Truth to Ponder. I'm your host, Bob Bierman. I do this program as a podcast and international shortwave. I pay for the time on shortwave. I want people to have the idea of some things to think about and ponder. You can disagree with me all you want. That's fine. I'm giving you an option, and I'm giving you some food for thought. And if I need to be slandered and criticized and misquoted, so be it. Metal midgets have a tendency to misquote anyway, so I don't worry about them. We'll be back after this break.
This is Truth to Ponder with Bob Bierman. is Truth to Ponder with Bob Bierman.
And welcome back to part 2 of the program, Truth to Ponder. I'm your host, Bob Bierman. Want to remind you about the website. If you want to find out more about the program, correspond with me. And you can also find how to get to our Facebook page if you want to communicate or debate with me. It's all there. And that is truth2ponder.com, truth2ponder.com. A direct email comes to me at bob@truth2ponder.com, truth2ponder.com. And for those, and I've had a number of letters of late that come in the mail. And they can come to either Truth to Ponder or just to Bob Bierman, Biermann, and it's 21 Berkshire Lane, number 263, 21 Berkshire Lane, number 263. And we are in the big city right now of Sky Valley, Georgia. Sky Valley, Georgia. And the zip code 30537. 30537. And, of course, in the United States of America, if you're listening outside of the USA. Well, we talked in the last segment, and I'm going to add one little other item to it that happened to come to mind during the break. You know, one of the things that I try to discuss and talk about is just the things in the world, give you a perspective, and it's fine to say I'm wrong, but don't misquote me. I was terribly misquoted on something else, that I made the statement and implied something that I did not say. I was talking about why churches and certain groups need to do certain things to get away from certain platforms on the internet. And in my discussion, I was talking not about the government in this case. I will tell you where the government will get involved at some point, but I wasn't talking about being censored by the government on the internet. And I was told, and this guy made it clear in an email that he wrote, that I said the government was going to censor you on the internet. Well, once again, let's go back to the audio recording. When you look at social media, I look at it, and man, I'm telling you, these are tech tyrants. Facebook is not your friend. If you have a church and you're streaming on Facebook, you better be looking for an alternative. You shouldn't be there. But Bob, we got to be on Facebook. No, you don't. You need to find something else, and I'll find it for you if I have to. Maybe you misunderstood. Maybe somebody did. But my entire conversation regarding being censored on the internet had more to do with the tech tyrants of Google that makes placement for certain things, Facebook, and Twitter. And we all know Facebook and Twitter. Maybe you don't. Maybe you're in full agreement. Well, as far as I'm concerned, they should be looked into by the Federal Elections Commission. I'm tired of them getting to pretend they're both a publisher and an open forum. Decide which one you want to be and live by those rules. I didn't say the government, but once again, I'm misquoted about the internet and the government. I didn't say any of that. I talked about those that have the big platforms, the multi-billion-dollar multinational corporations. That's who I'm talking about. When it comes eventually to what could be censored by the government, and I'm saying could, look no farther than Canada, where if you quote certain things from Scripture, and it has happened, I'm sure some will say that can't be true. So let me share a story that goes back about 2 years ago in Canada. And this is their Supreme Court from June 16th of 2018. There was a ruling, and the ruling was from the Canadian Supreme Court. They ruled 7-2 against Trinity Western University's law school. And what, in effect, they said, you ready for this? The court declared that universities must choose between biblical standards and accreditation. Put another way, the court ruled that Christianity and higher education are incompatible. And that's not an exaggeration. If you look at a quick summary, the university required that its students and faculty live by basic Christian standards. That's where they chose to go. No one forced them to go to that particular university. And that means to be a student or faculty member in good standing. Well, there are certain things you're not supposed to do. And you agreed to this when you went there. You had plenty of choices for a school. And what they were saying was they wanted basically people to live by a biblical standard. And if you don't do it, well, find another school. But no, not at all. And in this ruling, they are now including Christian schools from kindergarten through 12th grade, Christian colleges, Bible schools, seminaries, and universities. I mean, in other words, you as a Christian organization where people choose to be at your school, you cannot hold them to biblical standards. This is the kind of thing that is gradually working its way here. Now, would you like another example? If you look once again to Canada in the last couple of years, Canada's moved beyond a prohibition on certain kind of speech. It's now called compelled speech. And what that means is the law now regarding gender identity or expression, and it now adds that transgender protections to the federal law back in 2017 and British Columbia law in 2016. So in other words, if I see a male and I happen to call him a he, I can be sued if this person is wanting to be identified as a she. It becomes you can't say what you see. You have to live in their fantasy world. Will that come here? I think it will in time. It's on its way. Can churches talk about certain activities from a scriptural point of view? Certain Bible verses have now been literally, in the courts, identified as hate speech. What I'm saying on this station right now, which can be heard in Canada, I could never say on a Canadian radio station. I can't. I still can in the United States. You've got a guy in British Columbia, Ogre versus Watcott, and it's going to be a precedent setting event because the guy doesn't agree and thinks that transgenderism is not normal. And for that, he could be paying lots of money in fines, lose his job, and even under Canadian law could theoretically face jail time. So what I'm telling you is that things that we look at in the United States and say will never happen here, they end up happening here. Maybe not quite as quick, but they do. And that's my point. I don't care if you disagree with what I say in doing this program. That is your prerogative. That is your right. And you can send me an email to that effect. You can write anybody you want. You can go to my Facebook page for the radio program, and we can debate it there. But as I try to make it clear, I don't want to use my personal, the one that I use to talk to my grandkids. I don't want to sit and waste my time. That's why, in order to engage with me, it's supposed to be in such a way that my posts are hidden unless you're one of my family and friends. And that's my point. I'd like to have a little sanctuary away from constantly having to defend a position at 11 o'clock at night or 7 o'clock in the morning with a constant barrage on Facebook. That's why I chose, a couple of years ago, to just quietly say enough is enough. This is dominating too much of my life. And if I'm going to spend a little time on Facebook, I'd rather, be looking at pictures of cats or something. Or my grandkids and their first days in school. I'm old enough to remember when a group called the Birds took the words of Ecclesiastes chapter 3 and a number of the verses there and made a very big hit song. And it's good common sense advice. A time for everything. In chapter 3, for everything there's a season, a time for every matter under heaven. A time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant, a time to pluck up what is planted, a time to kill, a time to heal, a time to break down, a time to build up, a time to weep, a time to laugh, a time to mourn, and a time to dance, a time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek, a time to lose, a time to keep, a time to cast away, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. You know, in the course of a week, there's a time for a lot of things. And if we take our time and too much of it gets invested in the wrong things, it's not a healthy way to live. This program is done each and every day, and it runs right about an hour. And in this hour, I try to share some thoughts and ideas from a perspective. A lot of people have sent some nice emails and physical letters of late, and I've got from some a bunch of material to look through, and it's fascinating stuff, and I want to make sure that it's all accurate. And in the weeks ahead, I'll be sharing some of what you have sent to me. When I'm comfortable in talking about certain things, or find somebody that knows more about it than I do, and bring them onto the program, that's what we're going to do. Right now, it's the time to put the election aside because there's not much going to change in the next several days or into sometime next week. And rather than dwell on the things we can't deal with ourselves, there's nothing I can do to change anything that is going on, maybe it's time to move into a different direction and share some other thoughts about life and living. My wife and I were talking the other day about how the generations have changed and how expectations have changed. And that may be part of the problems we see today in a number of different areas. When I went to school, and I'm sure that this is the same for many of you that are my age, and I don't care what your political background is, but let's be real and honest, and let's go back to 1950s, 60s, maybe all the way into where I was at in the very early 70s. When you went to school, there were certain expectations to getting your grades. You had to be in class. You had to do some study. There were things called homework. I see a lot of kids that don't do it. If you had a paper to write, it was due by a certain date. If there was a quiz to be given, it was done at a certain time. Today, and I'm not exaggerating on this because this is not from some third hand, fifth hand. This is from first hand knowledge of people that my wife and I know quite well. You have children today. They don't bring any of their work home. They often have their work late or never turned in. And schools, in this effort to keep their graduation rate numbers really high to impress the public. And this is going on in a school district that I know firsthand. It is not that the persons involved have some real special need. It's the fact that they're lazy. And so they modify everything and they overlook things and they try to get them through the school system and, quote, graduated to keep up that high number. Yet did they take mathematics for 2 or 3 or 4 years? Well, they did, but they failed, but somehow it's going to be made better at the end. Their grammar, their English, their reading comprehension is just non-existent. The basics things that we learned in high school in the 60s and 70s and in the 50s, I'm sure. Many students, there's some that are learning all these things, but there are many that just don't, and they're addicted to their video games, and they spend all their time on their cell phones, chatting, looking at Facebook all day long, updating their status every half hour, sharing everything that they see in front of them. And they're going to come out of these schools ill-equipped to face life because, you're learning bad habits like, and we saw it, and I'm going to just go ahead and say it, even in some of the places with voting. Well, I never got around to it until after Election Day. Can I mail mine in now? I mean, there are people that literally are asking that question. It's like you didn't know that November 3rd was coming around. It's like you somehow missed it. And you had all this time to request an absentee ballot or show up or early voting. And somehow, I never got around to sending it back in. Can I send it in now? They're learning this in our school systems, that, deadlines really don't mean anything. When it comes to filing your taxes, you're going to learn real quick that deadlines do mean a lot. Just because it says April 15th, can I send mine in on May the 15th? Because I just don't have time right now. There are a lot of things in life that have deadlines. There are a lot of things like in our working lives. I look at the years that I worked. I couldn't decide that I wasn't coming into work. Back early in my radio career, I used to have to get up very early in the morning because I did the morning radio program. The station signed on at 6 a.m. I needed to be there by 5 or 5:10 at the latest to get everything ready to go on the air. I couldn't say, I don't feel like coming in today, and roll over, turn the alarm clock off, and show up at 9. They expected me to be there by a little after 5 to have everything ready, including checking the news wires, the teletype machines, and the weather, and call the various law enforcement agencies for any news information I needed to share, and get the transmitter warmed up. Some of those old units, they needed about a good 5 or 6 minutes of warm-up time, or you might be in for a surprise when you hit the high voltage switch. That was my life. When I moved into engineering and I was on call for a major market radio station, I think it was at that point number 3 in the market. If my pager, I'm dating myself now, if my pager went off and I saw in the little window 911, I knew there was a massive emergency at the radio station, and I immediately would call. My pager sat by my bed, and it made a lot of racket when it went off. And I couldn't just choose to ignore it. Even if it's 1 o'clock in the morning or 3 o'clock in the morning, it doesn't matter. I had to pick up that pager and look in the window, and there was always a little code number there. And I recognized it. 911 means we are in a world of hurt. And basically we use 411 as give the station a call when you got time, nothing urgent. And so if I saw a 411 and I'm in my car, this is before cell phones and all that wonderful luxury, I didn't try to stop in a hurry and find a phone booth. You remember those things? Used to keep plenty of quarters around just for that purpose. And I would run to a phone booth and I'd call the station if it was a 911, or if I could push the dial and find out my station's off the air, I just would go straight to the transmitter building and call from there saying I'm here and I'm looking at it because obviously there's a problem. If the station's on and it's 911, then I'm going to call the studio and find out what's going on. Responsibility is a dying art in our world today. It truly is. It's a dying art. And being irresponsible is being, well, rewarded in a backhanded kind of way. Consequence has disappeared. Parents no longer want to fight with their kids, so they just give in. And that can't bode well for the generation to come. 10 years, 20, 30 years from now, for me, it won't make any difference. I won't be here. But my grandkids will. My kids probably will be too. And I worry what kind of world they're going to be living in. Will responsibility ever become fashionable again? I don't know. I promise not to get into the election. I'll just say, but for some people, even in voting, there's an irresponsibility going on. Leave it right there. We'll get back to that stuff in a week. This weekend, I'm going to move into more different topics. I think time to get away from some of the politics and get to some of the underlying issues that we face in our world today. You know, we look at our churches and how ineffective so many have become. And I don't care if you believe in God or not. Actually, I do care, but I'm not going to sit here and debate it with you. I don't have time. If you have questions, I'm always happy to answer them. If you want to sit there and play one-upmanship with me, no time for that. I don't have time, because I believe in this world that time could be getting short. I think that the world as we know it is going to be changed. And you may not want to agree with that premise or not, but I mean, I'm just telling you, I think the world is going to be changed in time. I don't claim to be some kind of a prophet. I don't claim to be some kind of a soothsayer. But the evidence that I see in front of my nose is enough to convince me that if you are one that comes out of a biblical background, we are heading for a time. And I'm not going to be one of those people that get on the radio and try to sell you books and DVDs and tell you that, the world's going to end on this date. I don't do that. When I look at all the things in this world today, I'm not even going to go as far as to say this is the big great tribulation that's coming to get us and we better be ready. I don't go there. If you've listened to me long enough and honestly enough, you know that I don't. I just look at what the Bible has taught me, and I have my reasons for believing it. You can make fun of me. I don't care. If you want to discuss it, we can. But I'm not going to get into an endless shouting match on Facebook where it doesn't do anybody any good. There's an old saying, some people's minds are like concrete, and those that misquote me fit that bill. Their minds are like concrete, thoroughly mixed up and too well set. I come with a logical mind because I come out of an engineering background. Things to me, when it comes to mathematics, 2 + 3 = 5. It does not equal any other number I desire it to be. It either is 5 or it's not. If it's not 5, then what is it? And then we have a problem. We have nothing as a reference. How can you build a house, a car? How can you send something into outer space? How can you get a satellite to sit there geostationary at 23,000 miles if the math is whatever you want it to be today? And that's the biggest problem I think we face in our world today, is this moving target. This moving target where facts no longer are facts and truth can be whatever you want your truth to be today. George Orwell summed it up best when he talked about the ministry of truth. And I see the world sliding in that direction, where we erase history. We've been doing that this year. We resort to violence to force an ideology upon those that may disagree, like me. Would I say what we're about to face in the world is the Great Tribulation? I don't know. But I can look over history, and I can see over the last, 2,000 years, a lot of instability in the world. It was unstable 2,000 years ago. It was unstable 1,900 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 500 years ago. We have seen calamity. We've seen natural disaster. We've seen it all. I always remind people, in 1939, if you lived in Poland, you would have thought you were living in the Great Tribulation. If you were on the battlefields of France in World War I, you would have thought this is the Great Tribulation. So when does it end? I can't tell you. We'll get back to that soon. We'll see you tomorrow.
This has been Truth to Ponder with Bob Bierman. To find out more, visit our website, truth_ponder.com. That's truth_ponder.com. Truth to Ponder, shining the light of truth in a darkening world.